Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Crafting with DM. Today we're going to be putting paint to pallet and making a pallet for a mini. As we can see here, this is a pallet that I have used in the past. It's very well worn, very well loved, and a very cheap item you could even pick up at the dollar store for just a couple of dollars, and it's been very useful. But I will say recently I have decided to upgrade myself, and I got this Army Painter wet palette. It allows me to not have to use as much water and stuff in order to wet my palette, and it allows me, as I go painting on the go, sometimes to work and even to a different floor of my own house, allows me to keep everything in one spot, and it's a lot easier, especially when I have a 2-year-old helping me. Anyway, as we get right back into it here, we're going to continue to take a look here, because the next thing is you want to have a little bit of a dropper bottle with water in it. Water is going to be essential in thinning your paints. You don't want your paint to be too thick, you don't want it to be too thin. This bottle I've had for a while, as you can tell from the yellow discoloration on it. However, the other thing that you're going to need is you're going to need some paint brushes. You don't need anything expensive either. These I picked up at Walmart for just a couple of dollars, and they served me really well for a while. These are a bit older, a bit used. I don't use them as often anymore. These are more of my in case I need. These are the set that I just recently purchased from Walmart. Again, very cheap, very nice, and I've used them for about 20 miniatures so far, and they're still in really good condition. You really got to take care of the brushes. But just in case, because I do have my young daughter, I did pick up a secondary set, and it really wasn't that expensive, and they're really rather nice to use. The small brushes are good for the small minis. However, these are very large brushes. However, when we're doing big pieces, like say a boat that I am currently working on in my spare time, that I'll show eventually, these are very good for painting those large surfaces. Not so much for the small surfaces of a mini. Next thing you're going to want is you're going to want a cup. I use these disposable cups, really cheap, really easy to buy, to keep water in order to keep your brushes nice and clean, especially in between different dips of paint. I will say you don't really need too hot, too cold water, but the nice important thing is when you are working with paints and dipping and things like that, you really want to make sure that you have 2 different color cups. So like I'll use green for my paint water and red to drink. That way you're not accidentally using a green cup and a green cup and you accidentally drink your paint water. Warning, you are going to do it, don't worry. Most paints are non-toxic, but do make sure that your paints are non-toxic. Now, what we're going to do before we even start trying to figure out what paints we want to use for our mini is we actually want to set up a palette. And what I mean by palette is not the palette that we're going to be putting the paints in, but a palette more of a color idea fundamentally of what we want to do. He has different little potions and things that we can do some nice bright blues or greens or reds with. But that trench coat, I kind of like a nice burgundy. We're going to do with a little bit of a darker wood on the crossbow, some nice black metal there at the top of the crossbow, and at the buckles. We're going to do a regular leather color for a lot of those belts that he has around. His pants and boots, we're probably going to do like a black leather. Along with that satchel, going to be another blackish leather color. Along with the bundle of bolts on his back. The ends of the bolts I'm thinking of doing in a green, just as a nice little contrasting color. He does have those wraps on his arms, and I'm thinking of doing those. And I'm thinking about doing those arms in a little bit of off-white with a little bit of a bloody red in there. His hair, we're going to go with a nice little white to black little salt and pepper mix here. Here you can see all the paints that I plan on using, including my primers that I have. The primers being that black and white there in the back. But we're going to break down every color here really quick. as we're going through. The main thing is, as I said, these are what I use primers. Very cheap black, very cheap white. They really cover these minis really nicely. I use them as a primer or a base coat. You really want to have a base coat underneath all of your colors in order to help them even bring out extra tonality to them. Next year we're going to be looking at the different reds for the bow. As I said, I want to do kind of like a darker, but it's going to be more of a red wood. This is the leathers. Here we have the darker leather colors. We have the blade silver with a little bit of black and work. We have the ash gray in order to do that salt and pepper in the hair, adding in a little bit of black and white in order to make that happen. I know I'm going through these colors really quickly, but at the same time, it will all make better sense when we actually get to see paint on Mini. This dragon red is going to be for the trench coat. That there is called tanned flesh, and that's going to be for his skin. Those are for the wraps that he wears on his arms. And here we have a special little effect paint of glistening blood in order to bring that out more. We have our flesh wash in order to bring the strong tanned flesh down a little bit more to even the other colors. We also have a nice strong tone that's going to be very useful for the leathers. And then we also have a dark tone and a red tone, and those are going to be used in certain spots, and we'll show more about that later. But I want to thank you very quickly for watching, and keep in mind, next time we're going to be covering base coating. Until then, keep it real.